Hi everyone, one of the best things that has happened to me in this so-called decade is I learned a lot of skills that have significantly contributed to my resilience. One of those skills was to separate my self-worth from things that it really shouldn't be attached to. I'm probably like a lot of people in that you don't often consider the things that have made up your life and who you are until it actually falls apart. This means your self-identity can become wrapped up in things that probably shouldn't be, and it makes life challenging when those things are literally stripped away. Consider this. I went to comprehensive school at age 11 and I was moved early on into the top band. I did struggle with that, especially with the maths, but it was a blessing as I was moved to somewhere that it was a challenge, right? It challenged me, it wasn't easy mode. I then went to college, then to university, got a great job with a lot of client-facing and technical delivery elements which saw me go offshore on helicopters. It was a bit, tell you, it was a bit James Bond. Though I was glad it was only for a few short trips. Then I became head of IS at a growing company and that was amazing. I mean, one constant, everything improving trajectory. In that time, my identity very much became wrapped up in my career. It wasn't a high flying or anything. I was successful, but it was very much a sort of local success. I was relatively well paid for my age at the time. I got to do things like change how the whole organisation worked, grow with it. It was very much a technology-enabled business change position, and it was exciting. It wasn't that I was drunk on power, it wasn't that sort of position, it was an SME, right? Everyone's just bobbed down the corridor. But there was an element of feeling plugged into things, responsible for change, and having some level of respect. Then you have the grand Australian migration. What follows is a self-inflicted 5 years in which the very thing that defined my self-identity is taken away because I'm out of work. I tell you something. 5 years. I sort of knew that, but I'd sort of forgotten. And when I looked through LinkedIn for this video, I was like, 5 years. 5 years in which I was in things like temporary contracts paying lower than my career, in a startup which also wasn't great for my life earnings and had issues around it that meant it didn't really work as a great mechanism for my self-worth. I literally had to build my self-worth back up from the ground up during that period. 5 years. Wow. At a very early point in 2010, when I was particularly low, I got a phone call. It was from a recruitment agency. I was aware of that. I was aware of them. I'd spoken to them before, and they invited me to a seminar. It was very confusing at the time because my brain was confused and I wasn't really ready for that self-reflective sort of seminar, but also because they were inviting me to a multi-day seminar for professionals who had recently found themselves unemployed. I wasn't ready to admit that was me, a person who needed to go to a multi-day self-help group for the unemployed. I was that sort of person at the time. I didn't overly seek that sort of communal sort of help. They kept trying. They really thought I'd be a valuable contribution to the mix of people at the seminar, which was their reason for ringing. They even offered me it for free, and I think people had paid a good 3 to 4 grand for it, which just made it even more confusing, as I couldn't figure out why they'd do that, to see my presence as being that valuable. Such was my mindset at the time, right? Which is probably indicative of what was going on, but the whole thing sent me into turmoil. But again, conversations with my wife, she persuaded me to give it a go, and it was one of the best things I did. There are numerous things being at that seminar taught me. It taught me that it doesn't matter how successful you are, something can upend your life, through no fault of your own, severing the fabric of your existence and resulting in you being ignored. Not only that people drop you, you can presume you have a network, right? The valuable network, but let me tell you something. A percentage of that network will drop you like a frickin' stone because you become no longer useful to them, right? Your world shrinks. They don't have the attitude that you may become useful to them again and therefore things should be maintained. No, boom, off you go. You can no longer get them contracts Yeah, it's pretty brutal. The hole gets deeper and you feel you can't climb out of it. It was fascinating talking to people going through the same thing. And you do learn that you have life experiences and skills that can help and support people, and that in some way you do have the skills to do that. And that was fascinating. I'll admit I never considered that before. I wasn't that sort of person, right? I'm a very introverted, isolationist sort of person. So this idea that I could have talks with people that got them over problems was just boom. It was a brilliant experience, both advising and supporting people and having people do that in return. That experience has affected me until this very day. I mean, MBA levels of effect. In fact, in tandem with the MBA, this seminar is one of the things that influenced me the most in the first third, say, of my so-called decade. Importantly, which was one of the main themes of the seminar, you learn to detach your self-worth and identity from your job. Personally, this is one of the single best things you can do for your sanity and resilience in life. The simple reason for this is, unless you're running your own company, that train is being driven by someone else, and a whole myriad of factors you have very little control over. So you need to pin your self-worth to things that are more under your control and are constant across transient things like what you do for your 9 to 5. They ran the seminar twice, and after I did mine, I became a speaker at the next ones. I loved it. I did a segment on using LinkedIn to help with networking and various other things. It was a strange being in that position, actually having people taking advice from you, literally listening, hanging on your every word, as if you had something important to say. I mean, I've been in leadership positions before. You could say every single role I've been in since I graduated has been a leadership position, but it was actually direct help that people seem to appreciate and value. It was amazing to experience that and realise you could do it. It was actually a pity I didn't get to do that more often, but funding got pulled, the usual story, that the seminars ended. So one of the biggest changes in 2010, despite the fact my career did rectify itself during this so-called decade, is I no longer invest 100% of myself in it. I can now go for periods, I hope, I'm not looking forward to when it happens again, but I could now go for periods without work, and while it'll always be a concern for me financially, it'll no longer send me crashing into a period of spiralling reduced self-worth. Essentially, your self-worth becomes linked to a set of values that are cut across your job, what you spend your time doing in your spare time, and the decisions you make on a day-to-day basis, and that is one of the best things that has happened this decade. Until the next chapter, you can support me by doing a few things. Like the video, subscribe, hit the bell icon, certainly post a comment, and let's continue to make small great changes to make life a story worth telling.